We're going to make the jetted pocket with flap now.
For this, you'll need your 2 jets, okay, and you'll notice on the back, they look a little bit different than your ordinary calico because we've actually put some interfacing on the back.
This will give them more strength and sharpness in look.
2 of these pieces cut. This is your pocket flap, okay, and then we'll have the pocket bags. So we've also got 2 pocket bags. One is slightly shorter than the other one, okay. We've got our backing fabric, so this will be the garment that you're basically putting your jetted pocket onto. And I've also got another little piece of interfacing here,
which we've already actually put on the sample for you. The interfacing's got glue on one side.
So the soft side will be the side without the glue, and when you feel it, the bobbly side is the side with the glue on it. I'll show you where that's going in a minute. First of all, I'm just going to take my pattern and mark up the pocket position.
We've already marked the pocket position on your calico sample.
If I just take my chalk pencil, I can put a little dot in that hole there.
And I'm marking it quite lightly because this will be the right side of our garment. So that is the minimum markings we can do to make our pocket. You can draw a faint line between those 2 dots to help you.
So I want to put this interfacing on the back of my garment here at the exact position that I'm putting my pocket on. It'll just strengthen it, and you'll see why later on. So if I just put a little pin where my pocket opening is on each end, then I flip it over onto the inside, I can just go and interface this now on the iron. Now, and I'm just putting this piece of interfacing on the back there, just across where those pins were. I can take the pin out now. So you have to make sure you get the rough side facing your fabric, otherwise the glue will stick to the iron. You just need to give it steam, and then just keep the iron on it for a little while, as that'll get a lot of heat into it and really bond the interfacing onto your fabric. I've also bought the 2 jets to the press. So if you just fold them in half lengthways, so they meet with the interfacing on the inside, give that a press too. Okay, we go back to the sewing machine now. My 2 pocket flaps here, one on top of the other with the right sides together. Sometimes you'd put interfacing in this too, maybe 1 layer or both layers, just depends on your fabric. But for this sample, we're just going to keep them without any interfacing. So I'm going to start stitching. Stitching should be 1 centimetre in from that edge. And I'm following it around the curve all the way.
Keeping the same distance from the edge.
When you're going around these tight curves, you may need to stop and turn and pivot to get round the curve. So just do a few stitches and keep your needle in and pivot around. So you can see that stitch is just 1 centimetre in from the edge.
Before we turn it through, we need to trim our seam allowance down to get rid of some of the bulk. It depends on your thicknesses of your fabric, how you trim it, but for this we're just going to trim to about half of our seam allowance.
All the way. Okay, and so that we can turn this edge through, we need to do some more little snips, and these are going to look like little pizza slices.
They'll end up looking like little triangles like this. Try and keep them evenly spaced from each other and not right up to your stitch line, so that when we turn it through, the curve is nice and even.
I'm going to turn this through now. So we've bagged it out, and we're going to go and press it. So we've just brought this to the press. So we're rolling this seam so it's right on the edge, like that. And we're going to give this a nice press now.
Again, the way you press the pocket flap may be different depending on your fabric. If, for example, you had a thick wool on one side and a lining on the underside, you'd want to make the lining a bit smaller and press the wool round so the lining does not stick out.
So we've bagged out our pocket flap now. If you fold it in half like that, you can kind of check that your curve looks similar. So one is not completely different than the other side. Yeah? So I'm back at my machine and you can see here, this is the line for my pocket opening. So if I put the raw edge of my jet up to that line, and I'm going to start stitching at the dot there, which is where the pocket mouth opens. Okay, so I'm going to stitch right down the center of this jet. Okay, so it should be central. You do need to do a back tack here.
Each end of this stitch line needs to be quite strong.
So I've back tacked that end and I'm just stitching right down the center, which means the same amount of fabric should be showing either side of my foot there. Okay, I'm conscious of where I need to stop, so I'm just stopping where the pocket finishes there. Okay, if you wanted to put a little mark actually on your jet, you could transfer that like that. Back tack there. Okay, so you can see I've finished stitching. I've got this overhang here. We're going to butt the other one right up, raw edges together, so we don't want a gap and we don't want an overlap for this pocket. So if I transfer, I can transfer that mark over to here, so it should be level, and the same on this end, should be level. Okay, and then we're going to stitch down the center of this jet also. You need to back tack at the end, that's really important. And we're going to stop exactly on that. I'm going to back tack. Okay, so I've stitched those both on now. You can see that row of stitching right down the center, 2 rows. They should be level when they finish at each end. Okay, you trim your threads, it's easier to see. So we're going to cut into this now, but first of all I want to check that this pocket flap is going to fit my pocket. So if I sit it on top there where that pocket opening is, I can see that my pocket flap is a little bit longer than my stitches. So I can either reduce the size of this or I can take my pocket a little bit longer there. Okay, I think I'm going to go in and reduce the size of my pocket flap so that it fits that pocket mouth perfectly. It's just a couple of millimeters. I turn it through, make it a little bit smaller. Trim it down again. Turn it through and press it. Just going to check again. Okay, so that's about right now. That fits about right for my stitching. Okay. So now we're just going to lift up the jets there and we're going to cut into the back layer. So if I just fold it like that, I can get my first snip and then put my scissors into that snip and cut down the center here. We need to stop before we get to our stitch line here, so about 1 centimetre before, and then we're going to cut out diagonally right up to our stitch. Just 1 millimetre before the stitch. Okay, we're not cutting through those jets, we're just cutting through the back layer. Okay, so it's looking something like that, and the same on the other side. Move your jets out the way, trim, stop about 1 centimetre before you get to your stitch, and then cut out diagonally to where that stitch finishes. Don't cut past the stitch, just right up to the stitch. Take our jets and flip them to the inside like that, so that now we've got the folded edge meeting, and then we can push those ends in like that. Yeah, turn it round, push the other sides in. Okay, so now we can lift the end up, and we're gonna stitch over this triangle here. So the jets should be meeting nicely like that in the middle. Okay.
If there's a little overlap or a little gap, you can manoeuvre them slightly and manipulate them together at this stage.
So we're just going to stitch over the triangle and through those jets to secure it. I normally just go forwards and backwards. Okay, so that's all secure now there. If we turn it round, we can do the other side. Lift our garment up, just get them so they're not overlapping, and flatten the triangle down. We hold on to it, we can stitch across that triangle there. So that's secure now, and you can see that it needs a little press. On the inside, we've got our raw edges there. So we're just gonna give it a nice press. Just pull that jet out and roll that seam back with your fingers so it's nice and flat. Gentle press. So it looks something like that, and the inside will be like that. So we've pressed the pocket. Now we're going to sit our pocket flap in between those two. So in the pocket opening here, we're just going to push it in. Okay, if you turn it over, you can see that it needs pulling up a little bit so that it meets the raw edge there of the first jet. Okay. Then we just want to check from the other side that it's nice and even, yeah? So we haven't got one side longer than the other, and it's the perfect fit, so it's not wrinkling up or it's not too small for the opening. Okay, if it is, you can just adjust it now. So whilst that's sat in there, we can also put the pocket bag on now too. So we've got our two pocket bags. We've got the shorter one and the longer one. The longer one will be going at the back, so that's the under pocket bag. So if we take it now and sit it on top of our pocket flap and our jet, we've got to stitch through all those layers now. So what we need to do is pick it up, flip it over, and basically stitch
right on top of that original row of stitching, or a millimetre to the right of it.
You don't need to do a back tack here. Okay, so we flip that up, we've stitched our pocket flap in, and the back pocket bag is also there. So it looks like that. If we now lift that up, we can put the shorter pocket bag on top of the underneath the lower jet. If we hold it, and again pick all those layers up, flip it over, making sure you stitch just next door to that original row. Try not to go over there. You can stitch directly on top of that initial row of stitching if you wanted to. You don't need to back tack there. Okay, so we just want to make sure that this one that we've just stitched on, we want to bring it downwards and just give it a steam here. Yeah. So we're on the inside now, and that one can just lay on top of it, and they should match at the bottom here now. Okay, so now it looks like this. We've got our pocket flap. All we need to do now is stitch those two layers together of the pocket bag. So we go back to the machine. We just need to sew the two pocket bags together now. If you just lift up the top layer, starting from the top here, we've got a centimetre seam allowance on this. Do a little backpack. And then we're just closing the pocket bags. As you're going round, you just need to move this out of the way so you can get all the way around. Back to the top of your pocket on the other side. Okay. This flap can also sit inside like that, so it looks plain. For this sample, we're not really going to worry too much about neatening or overlocking the inside of the pocket. This could be sat inside a fully lined garment, which means you would never really see the inside. There is actually a more complicated method of making a jetted pocket which neatens itself out.